The Friday of a long weekend, a beautiful weather weekend at the start of August. That's got to be the most mail-it-in Friday of all mail-in Fridays, right? This is OverDrive, though. You do have myself, Brendan Dunlop, alongside Dave Feschuk of the Toronto Star, riding you through these 3 hours on what's been a good sports week. There's been some good talking points. We got into some real depth with early preseason NHL predictions. We'll get into a little bit of hockey talk, but we've got tennis coming up with the Open that'll be here next week. I'm also very excited a little bit later to get into some CFL talk with Milt Stiegel, my friend. But where shall we go first? Since we were talking so much about the Blue Jays, how important it was to put on a good showing against the AL East leading Baltimore Orioles. You know, they snuck out that win the other night. So a matinee game, all the momentum should have been with the Blue Jays. And God, it was not there at all yesterday afternoon, man. Was it?
Yeah, like it feels like you just keep repeating yourself. Like this team, you come into a series against the Orioles, you think this is a great opportunity for the Blue Jays to put a stamp on the fact that they're resurgent, and the idea that, hey, they're the division leaders, but nobody expected them to be the division leaders. A lot of people expected the Blue Jays to be the best team in the AL East going back to spring training. And what do? They fold. They give three or four games away to the Baltimore Orioles, and it's the same theme again. The offense, which was supposed to be formidable, which was supposed to be one of the best offenses in baseball, does not come through when it matters. Mm-hmm. And Kevin Gausman wasn't great, but guess what? You lose 6-1. When you score one run, I don't care how good Kevin Gausman would have been yesterday, it probably wouldn't have mattered.
No, honestly. I mean, that's a Shohei Ohtani problem. How many times is he out there on the hill pitching gems, might give up one run and they can't get a hit? Yeah. And the Jays are now in this situation where, like, they can't get it together. And it'd be different if it was one guy. It'd be different if it was one injury they're dealing with. We're talking about multiple dudes through the lineup that just can't connect anymore. No. It's a real mental problem through that whole room.
And it's a big problem. And just when you thought, oh, boy, we're having a problem, we got the Baltimore Orioles, against whom we are now 2 wins and 8 losses on the season. Oof. In a year where we're 8-23 against the American League East. Now you go to Boston, and it gets worse because you are 0-7 against the Red Sox, who, by the way, are playing better than they were at any point in the season. You know, especially at a time when you were 0-7 against them. So it's not getting better for the Blue Jays. It's not getting better for George Springer. It's not getting better because their best player in Bo Bichette is not available due to the knee injury. They're taking on some water here, Brendan.
Yeah, it's a bad time to go to Boston.
It really is.
Like the change in schedule where they have fewer games against the AL East, I truly thought that was going to benefit the Blue Jays. Seems like it's benefited everybody else.
Yeah.
And now, like, it's thank God they don't have more games against their own division because they wouldn't be anywhere near the position they're in right now.
No.
The fact that they are hanging by a thread is pretty shocking, the way that they performed that last little bit. And if they don't go and, to me, if they don't go and take 2 in Boston, we're having a very different conversation next week.
Maybe. I mean, look, the glass half full is that they're still in it. They're still sitting in a playoff spot for all the things that are going wrong and all the naysaying and the doomsaying around town, which is justified, by the way, because you're 8-23 against the AL East. You got a negative 27 run differential against your own division. Mm-hmm. You're right now you're 28th in batting average with runners in scoring position, which is the most perplexing thing of all, probably.
Right.
The idea that you're not hitting particularly well, but you're really hitting like dregs of the league when you got guys in scoring position. I saw it again yesterday on a day where the first inning, they're first and second with nobody out, and they can't get one across. I mean, it just recurs and recurs and recurs. There's poor approaches at the plate at those times. It's hard to explain what's going on here, but like at what point, if you're Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro, at what point do you shake things up? Like the Yankees weren't hitting without Aaron Judge, and they fired the batting coach, right? Mm-hmm. Like at what point do you say something's got to change here? And if it couldn't be bring in better personnel at the trade deadline, which, you know, they brought in some guys, but, you know, they certainly didn't bring in that power right-handed bat that they've been talking about. If you didn't add at the trade deadline, do you make a change on the other level, like the coaching level, the managerial level, some sort of statement-making moment where you say, we're not letting this season just fall into the abyss here? Because right now it's got the feeling like it could.
They let that trade deadline pass, and I mean, they've run out of options, right? To look at the staff and pick one guy and single him out. I think for the Yankees, they were in a position where they weren't going to gas Aaron Boone.
Right.
So, you know, what could they do tangibly to look like they're shaking things up, and it seems like it's made a difference. But tonight you got Alek Manoah on the hill against the big maple, James Paxton.
Yeah.
Well, is that a nickname that's like faded since he's left the Pacific Northwest? I feel like I heard that all the time when he was a Mariner.
Good point.
Now they're just like Paxton, or maybe they're just talking about him less because he's not as effective as he was.
It's not the greatest nickname either.
The Big Maple.
You like that? I don't know. I don't know if I don't know if it really caught on. Like, I guess it was catching on for a little while there.
Canadian national team legend, goalkeeper Craig Forrest, when he was in England, he went as a 16-year-old and he was like 6'3", and they called him the Big Redwood.
Okay.
But there are no redwood trees in Canada, in British Columbia.
Is that true?
It's they might be in the Pacific Northwest, but not in BC, if I'm not mistaken. I think they're probably native to California, big redwoods, actually.
That's what you think of.
That's what you think of.
Yeah.
But so in that category, I mean, I've never had a nickname that resembled some like menacing tree or something large. So I think that's why I'm a little envious, maybe.
Yeah, look, I mean, the Big Maple, it's a good name, but I mean, bottom line is he's a good left-handed pitcher, and it's going to be, a challenge for Manoah.
Anybody is a challenge, though, for the Jays bats, right? Anybody on the hill is a challenge. Yeah, so it's good that he's not firing like a Cy Young candidate like he would have been in previous years. But for Manoah, like to go into that ballpark with a team in this position now, I think this is why you look at this 4-gamer against the Orioles and feel like, man, they're not setting themselves up to make anything easier.
No.
And it's like there are a few, moments, maybe a few at-bats where you're just like, this means more than the rest of the game. Or this game at the beginning of August means a little bit more because you need the team to have some confidence going to Boston. We know that Manoah hasn't had it, hasn't found it. And now you're going feeling like the wheels are falling off as we just described. We could be talking about this team being out of it by the end of next week if things continue to go the way they're going. Like, that's even more pressure on a guy who's clearly feeling more pressure than anybody.
Yeah, like the Manoah thing. I mean, look, it's there's been moments where it looks like he's getting closer.
Yeah, Detroit.
Yeah. Well, Detroit, yeah, exactly. A lot of guys look really good against Detroit.
Yeah.
But look, it's it's a major issue, right? If you can't get it together. And you got a feeling like, pitching's the least of their problems. Like that's the interesting thing about this team.
Right.
Whereas poorly as it's gone from Manoah, and Ryu is certainly, nowhere near a guy you'd want to count on in a big moment right now. We had Steve Phillips on, and Steve's going to join us again today.
That's right.
A couple days ago, and Phillips was saying he trusts a lot of people in this pitching staff more than he would trust Manoah and Ryu, even though at their best they've been reliable players, but coming back from what they're coming back from is clearly not easy. So, yeah, I don't know, man. It's perplexing when you look at their record against the East. They've been okay against the Yankees. They're 3-4 against the Yankees. They're 3-4 against Tampa Bay. But to be 0-7 against Boston, to be 2-8 against Baltimore, there's not a lot of explanation for it. And to be as bad as they are at the plate with runners in scoring position, I was listening to a podcast last night on performance under pressure, because we had Ross Atkins on here around the trade deadline, and he brought up, when we brought up the idea of runners in scoring position and how his team had not performed well, he brought up the idea of pressure, whether there's extra pressure because, you got ducks on the pond. You got to cash them in. And we didn't bring that up. He brought it up. And I wonder how much of this is psychological with this team.
So much.
Yeah.
So much. But I wonder beyond what is the standard, have the sports psychologists available, make it a volunteer basis. Like, are you doing group sessions where you're trying to get into everybody's mind and then isolate, one-on-one if there's like a real problem? Like, I don't know how you fix that. We had a conversation this week with Travis Snyder about that. And I asked them, you see sports psychology in other sports and the impact that it's had. Do you think Major League Baseball is at that level? It's a very complex question. It's a very, there's not one singular answer. But for a team that I think all of a sudden has to take the lead in figuring it out, what works for their ball club because this season is slipping away from them, that's hard. That's even more pressure on the front office that was already feeling it coming into this season as contenders and favorites in a lot of people's eyes.
Yeah. And then you stack on top of the fact that you've had this season-long problem where you haven't been cashing in runs,
right?
Leaving guys in scoring position again and again and again. And that, I think it probably builds on itself. And then you come to a point where on top of all that, your best player is not in the lineup. The guy who's been, leading the American League in hits for much of the season is not in the lineup. And suddenly it's not unlike the Yankees without Judge. Like, the Yankees went from being a kind of a team that was kind of hanging on with Judge to completely falling out of it without Judge. And you wonder if the same pattern will repeat here, where if Bichette doesn't get back quickly, like it could get really bad for these guys.
I think so too.
You know what I mean? Like it feels like who's going to pull him out of this is my question.
Right.
Like they're in a bit of a death spiral here. And it's a death spiral where they can still recover because, as we point out, with the extra wild card, they're still holding fast into that third wild card spot. That's a positive in a lot of ways, but you just get this feeling like there's nobody kind of taking up the mantle and saying,
"There's no
hey guys,
savior
follow me here."
Exactly.
Do you feel anybody stepping up and saying, maybe Whit Merrifield's been pretty dependable and reliable.
Brandon Belt on Wednesday night.
Belt's been a nice flash of promise.
Sure. Positivity. For a team that really needs it.
But, there haven't been a lot of those.
No. And look at the guys that we're naming. These aren't the guys that you want to be the guy or need to be the guy at this point of the season.
Hey, so your best player's out. A guy who's supposed to be one of your best players, and George Springer, is going through an all-time career morass.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just slumping.
Morass. That's a good word.
I don't know.
Buddy, you are a skilled writer. That is a good word to pull that out. It doesn't always translate, the words that we choose in written copy as opposed to radio and TV, but that was a good one.
It's not pretty for him, right? Like, he does not want to be where he is right now. And again, like, what's the solution? They've demoted him in the lineup. They've taken him out of the leadoff spot. It's not working.
No.
He's just not the same guy. And whether that's, we don't know. With him, health's always been an issue with him. There hasn't been anything top of mind that I've heard that is plaguing him, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy as Jay, so it wouldn't shock me if behind the scenes he's dealing with something that he hasn't mentioned. Or maybe it's just, hey, I'm just not hitting like I normally do, and I'm trying to work my way out of it because that's baseball.
Could be that. I don't know if we're talking about the Blue Jays as a playoff team next week, certainly this point next week, but that's one of the things I will ask Steve Phillips when we talk to him in the 5 o'clock hour. NFL preseason. I love hearing Matt Cause on Gameplay talk about the hardcores that are really in it. Like, it takes a lot of skill. If you're betting on preseason football, like there's a lot of factors, there's a lot of elements, there's a lot of research that goes into being a successful bettor. Sometimes I think that the gamblers, the ones that are really in it, are sharper than some of the coaching staffs.
Oh, you can.
Or just trying to figure out, and get through that week of preseason. Did you catch any of the Hall of Fame games?
Oh, yeah. It's always cool to see NFL football on your TV, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. There's something about early August where it just feels too early, though.
It feels too early, but it's still, it's the same voices. It's the same picture. It's like it's big time football without the big time names.
But
there's no Aaron Rodgers there, but hey, there's some New York Jets out there.
There are some New York Jets, and Zach Wilson might be a guy that's pushing Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah,
that's a
maybe
who knows? As the season plays out, maybe. I mean, that'll be the sports talk conversation.
You know what? That's for the Aaron Rodgers doubters. There's certainly that idea that hey,
I think there's a lot of doubters, man.
Well, here's the thing: was last season about the thumb? Could have been about the thumb, and maybe it was just a bad year with a bad thumb where he just couldn't really be Aaron Rodgers, right? And the 2-time reigning MVP had a less than MVP campaign.
Yeah.
And maybe if he's healthy, he comes back to being that 2-time MVP. Or maybe he's getting older, and maybe he's not the same guy, and maybe he's bitten off more than he can chew going to the biggest market in the biggest league.
Yeah.
And allowing the spotlight to be on him 24/7 in a way that's not going to be flattering after he comes out of small market Green Bay.
And a team that's had more upside than they've had in recent years, but certainly not a team that you would classify as having a lot of upside without someone who is a Super Bowl winner and an MVP coming into that situation, right?
Well, and also they're the Jets.
They're the Jets. I also think that an element to his poor season last year was I think he was souring on his situation in Green Bay for like a couple of years.
Right.
And that, last year, it may have been just something he couldn't get over. You throw in the thumb. I don't even know if the thumb was maybe as big of a problem as the mental hurdle that it was from last year.
Wow. You say he was souring on Green Bay, the guy who normally sits in that seat, the big B. Hayes, who's got the big G behind him at his home office setup, big Green Bay fan. He would tell you that Green Bay was souring on Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
And the act of complaining about the fact that you don't have enough teammates and complaining about the fact that the young guys don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. I agree that the team was probably.
Right? He wasn't a particularly good teammate. For all, you say what you want about Aaron Rodgers' talent.
Yeah.
Because he's got talent coming out the wazoo. but I was not impressed with his comportment as a teammate.
Right.
These past couple of years in Green Bay.
Didn't handle himself like the professional he had seemingly showed earlier in his career. Fair.
Didn't appear to.
Right.
Really came off as super sensitive, bit of a diva, wholly entitled.
Right.
And not a guy that was ready and willing to go out there to OTAs, to early training camp games and practices and help make his teammates, many of whom were very young, and very inexperienced, and make those guys better. He just didn't appear to want to do that.
So chicken or the egg here.
Right.
Who soured first?
Right.
I think he soured. The team responded. Then you had last season play out the way it was. You still expect him to be professional, and on the field he was, he did a job, but it wasn't the level that you expect from him, and certainly not the level they're paying him for. And now the Jets are hoping that they get a guy that can rock the clock back, not just physically but mentally, and put them in a situation that they've been dreaming about, having a superstar quarterback. But there's people like me and Grappler wondering if someone like Zach Wilson is going to challenge him. Because you know what's going to happen. He's not going to get through the whole season healthy. So at what point in the season, if he misses 2 or 3 games, Zach Wilson gets hot, then you've got this controversy. It's New York, man. It's New York.
Do you really, I'm not sure that's going to be a storyline.
I know Mark Sanchez, Geno Smith, not the same category as Aaron Rodgers, right? But also, this Aaron Rodgers aging is not the same guy from 3 seasons ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that the gap in between where that someone can be challenged, someone like him can be challenged, it's a lot smaller than it used to be.
Yeah, look, I mean, they're good. I think they're going to give the guy all the run in the world to try and figure it out, right? Like they've invested heavily on the Aaron Rodgers era, and they're not going to let it go by the wayside.
But in New York,
it struggles a little bit.
But in New York, when you spend money, if it doesn't work, you just let it go. Look at the Mets.
Well,
look at Steve Cohen and the Mets.
You're right.
I mean, last winter when they thought, put a pitching staff together, put Scherzer and Verlander back together, you'll be fine.
Yep.
And now Verlander is a Astro again.
Yeah.
And they've just restocked the farm system in New York. Mets fans Mets fans are Jets fans for a reason, right?
Oh yeah.
It's not just geography. It's because there's a lot of like in the way that they operate and the hopes and dreams that they have and the hopes and dreams that fade very quickly. So
that's a good point.
It's gonna be an interesting season.
No, it's gonna be compelling. I mean, it's like there's no better theater than watching a big time athlete try and take on New York. Like it's not always easy.
No,
right?
Look at Kevin Durant, man.
Yeah,
look at Kevin Durant.
And that was with I'm not sure that Brooklyn Nets really qualify. Like they're not the Knicks,
right?
But they are New York. There's no doubt about it. But you're right.
And it was a super team. It's not like he showed up there, the equivalent to, I was going to say the equivalent to Phoenix, but I mean, you could argue with Devin Booker. Phoenix definitely had a lot of pieces to be considered, and were a team coming off of a finals appearance not too long ago. So I definitely different from the Knicks, but I still think that kind of New York monster and him being someone that doesn't handle it well when there's a lot of particularly negative attention around him was one of the reasons why it didn't work out there. And I still look at that team and what they built and the promise when they had signed Kyrie and KD. It's just wild to think it didn't work.
Yeah, well, it came within a toenail of beating Milwaukee there in the year Milwaukee wins the championship.
Right.
Like you think about how it could have gone if that shot by Durant goes in.
This first round though, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's shocking. Like you think about those things, right? And they were, they were on their way in many ways, and then they just never were able to recapture it. So, yeah, you're right. It's Durant's a good example of how you can put together a team that looks good on paper in the offseason and can perform well, but it's always a fine line. And you're right. Like when you got these kind of sensitive super geniuses of sports, like the Kevin Durants and Aaron Rodgers of the world, New York can be tough.
Sensitive super geniuses. Another great description, man.
Well, that's what those guys are, right? They're savants. Durant, Rodgers, not many. We haven't seen many talents of that caliber cross our paths in the last 20 years.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not as good with words as you, but I will say for Steve Kerr, he's someone that's bold and vocal when the mic is on, and from all understanding behind the scenes as well. He's now has Chris Paul to coach. And he was honest about his thoughts on Chris Paul when Chris Paul was an opposing player and not exactly someone that was particularly liked by Steve Kerr previously.
One of the funny things about this league is that you compete against people, and then all of a sudden you're teammates or you're coaching someone, and you laugh at moments like this where, you're at each other's throats for much of your career. Reminded me a little bit, when I played, Reggie Miller and I played against each other in college and then the pros as well. And I used to hate Reggie. Oh man, like he was, and then we became broadcast partners and he became a great friend. And so I feel like that's kind of how it's going to be with Chris. We've all hated him, because we were competing and he was so good. And now that's our guy and we love him.
I love the honesty. I'm also not really surprised when you think about it. At least he's got the experience of having gone through this already with Reggie Miller.
Yeah.
Right. I remember that, them being broadcast partners, thinking they must not talk in commercial breaks. Like they must have just hated each other. But there's not too many people on that Bulls team that I think outside of the season took the hatred and the rivalry as deep as Mike did.
No.
I don't think Steve Kerr had a lot of those Jordan genes in him to carry that through. Certainly competitive, and you live it in the moment. When the season ends, like you can put that aside.
Yeah, Michael Jordan holds grudges. I was that 60 Minutes thing with Charles Barkley where he talked about, and he's talked about it before, but he was just on 60 Minutes, I guess, a couple weeks ago, talking about how, Michael didn't like something that Charles said about Michael's ownership tenure in Charlotte, and hasn't spoken to him since. And they were good golfing buddies there for a long while, right?
Probably because Jordan just enjoyed taking money off Chuck.
Well, that's possible. Many people have taken money off Chuck reportedly.
Golfing. Yes.
Many casinos, apparently.
Yes. But,
there's been a few headlines about that.
But I meant specifically golfing.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of headlines about how Jordan loves to gamble on absolutely everything. So I feel like, a day on the links for someone who is as competitive and has the itch for gambling that Michael Jordan has, and going out regularly with Charles Barkley. I wonder, how much of that friendship was financially beneficial for Mike and how much was actually enjoying being out there on the golf course for all the hours he was.
It's a very good question.
Right?
Very good question. Yeah. I think all of Michael Jordan's golf partners probably got to be careful out there. Although apparently, Adam Svensson, the good Canadian PGA tourist who's been playing well in the latest event, the Wyndham, he was telling me a story about playing golf with Michael Jordan down at one of Jordan's courses in Florida, and how it was, it was intense, right? Like, and Michael enjoyed, if you were playing 18, you were playing 36 because he wanted to double down on the morning bet in the afternoon, and it never really ended. Yeah,
there's not too many situations when you're around a star where I would have been in where I think I would feel intimidated. But on the golf course, if I got paired like in a foursome with someone like that, I would be terrified.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Michael Jordan's terrifying. Yeah,
I couldn't imagine it. Whereas in a scrum, I think I would feel maybe professionally nervous, perhaps. You're a little, you put a little more thought in the questions that you're going to ask if you get the opportunity in a big scrum to ask that. I was like that with LeBron James. But I wouldn't describe it as being nervous or afraid. But I would definitely be nervous to be in an athletic setting around Michael Jordan where he's watching me do something athletic like try to hit a drive.
Unless you're a better golfer than Michael Jordan, in which case you think there's a victim right there. With a big wad of bills in his wallet that I can take.
Yeah, but
I'm sure a few pros have done that.
But I'd probably be that guy. You think pros have taken money off Mike though?
Oh, for sure. Sure. He's not like, he's a willing bettor, right?
Right.
And he's not that good compared to pros. So,
yeah.
And there's candy. Look, I don't know what kind of handicaps they're giving him some shots.
Sure.
But my understanding is, he doesn't win them all.
And I mean, you just wonder if he was, younger. You look at the opportunities that Steph Curry's had to play the Pro-Am, and there are a lot of people saying that if he retired, he'd have a chance. Gareth Bale's trying to go pro.
Yeah.
Did you know this?
Oh, yeah, he walked away from soccer, right? Yeah,
walked away from soccer, 33 years old, I think, after taking Wales to the World Cup for the first time in 56 years.
That's fascinating.
MLS Cup title.
That's fascinating.
That Gareth Bale would walk away like that?
Yeah.
A lot of people questioned his love for the game at Real Madrid. He had 7 very successful years in terms of winning the Champions League. But he wasn't always a key piece of those teams. He was for a couple of those titles. But at the end, he was just kind of a passenger. Always someone that they said, didn't love it, didn't have the passion for it. Came to MLS, won an MLS Cup, takes his nation to the World Cup, and then he's out. And now he's golfing, trying to be a pro golfer. So I just wonder if Mike might have had that opportunity.
Not good
Different
enough.
time.
Not good enough.
Different
good player, but not a pro. Steph, maybe. Steph swings pretty smooth, man. He's the old man Dell was a hell of a golfer too, and if he wasn't playing 82 games plus all the playoffs, there's a chance he could probably senior tour could still be there for him.
Well, we're going to talk about one hell of a hockey player, with Tarik El-Bashir from The Athletic, talking about the Capitals and Alex Ovechkin. Hockey talk next on OverDrive on TSN2 and TSN 1050 in the iHeartRadio app. Trust me, nobody wants to watch me dance. I found that out when I was doing the Gold Cup final at SoFi Stadium, and I'm like the host in the stadium, right? So I do the announcements, I queue up basically the people that are dancing and working the crowd. I'm not the hype person. I'm just the host guy, right?
Okay.
Pitch side. But working with a group that loves the idea of like everybody participating, everybody dancing, right? And the DJ's great. And I got caught dancing on a camera at SoFi. And then, you're in that period where just like you're waiting for the camera to cut. But then you work with a team that knows that I'm dying up there. So they just love it. So they just leave you up there.
They just kept you on the big screen.
And SoFi's got the big double screen.
Oh, man.
Right? So it's everywhere. So as in I can see from my peripheral and you're just waiting. You're like, I don't know what to do. If I stop dancing, they'll cut away, but then I look like I've just quit.
Right.
So what do I do? Now I got to amp it up.
They got to keep
And then
dancing.
I amp it up. They keep it on. It was off. It was 45 seconds of horror for me.
45 seconds. That is torturous.
Yeah, it is. It is.
For you and the crowd.
At least the Mexican fans with home with a window.
I'm sure you're very...
That's also the beauty of it. It is only the people in the stadium.
Okay.
Only the people in the stadium. They got the show. Well, let's continue with the hockey talk in this show. Tarik El-Bashir from The Athletic and NHL on TNT. He's a ringside reporter. Joins us to talk a little Washington Capitals and everything. Tarik, how you doing, man?
Good afternoon, fellas. I'm doing great.
Great to have you on the show. I did anticipate that if I did get the chance to have some Washington Capitals talk this week, we might be talking about an extension for Tom Wilson. I did not think that we'd be talking about a $45 million 7-year extension for Tom Wilson. But what did you think when you saw those numbers and saw the term come out?
Honestly, I was surprised it wasn't higher. I was expecting it to be in the sevens, low sevens. Tom Wilson, I know the analytics crowd, looks at his numbers and maybe, his age and now injury history, and maybe some of the suspension stuff in his past and go, it's a bit of an overpay. But if you're here in DC and you watch this guy on a night-to-night basis, and you see how he operates in the, behind the scenes in the locker room, he just does so much for this team. He plays on the power play, plays on the penalty kill. He's your enforcer. He's your deterrent. Everyone's 2 inches bigger when Tom Wilson is on the bench, right, or on the ice. He'll fight if necessary. He can play with your top guys. He's a leader on the ice, off the ice. And he's also a fan favorite. I know most of the league probably hates him, but in DC, he's beloved. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't a surprise that they had a meeting of the minds here and they were able to hammer something out, because all along Tom Wilson said he wanted to stay in Washington, and the Capitals have said all along that they wanted to re-sign him. There were some trade rumors that kind of percolated sometime around the draft. I was always told, those were fantasy and fiction by people behind the scenes. And, I checked in with Pat Morris, his agent from Newport Sports earlier today, and he confirmed, he said there was never anything to those things. They didn't know where they came from. So, he's now signed, guys, for 3 years longer than anyone else on the roster. You know what that tells me? When Alex Ovechkin hangs up his skates, whether that's in 3 years or 4 years, whenever he does, I bet Tom Wilson is your next captain of the Capitals.
Mm. Well, that's interesting. So you thought it maybe would be a little bit more of a lucrative extension, but on the other hand, this is a guy who will be in his age 37 season by the time this thing is over. Like, how do you figure his game is going to weather with age, given how he puts his body on the line?
Sure. I think there's some concern there. I mean, there's no way you can look at the way he plays, how physical he is, the fact that he, is coming off a torn ACL. And, he missed a lot of time last year due to injuries. He came back from the ACL, and then he hurt his ankle blocking a shot. You look at the way he plays, and sure, you can look at it and go, on the back side of this deal, those last 3 years, that it may be an overpay. But, when you're signing these long-term extensions, you also got to worry about the here and now. And, as I was saying, Wilson, he's your first line right wing. And in talking to Pat Morris's agent earlier today, he made a very good point. He said, if you look at all the rumors that were percolating around the trade deadline. They were becoming a distraction for the player and for the team. They weren't in season, but, everyone hears them, and it starts to bother people. If those things were starting to become an issue in July, imagine what those are going to be like in, say, November or December. So getting a deal done now, both sides felt like that was the best course of action. And, getting back to your question, could it be an overpay in those last 3 years? Potentially. But you know what? I'll tell you another thing about Tom Wilson. He's in the best shape of anybody in that locker room. He knows every single thing he puts in his body. He works as hard as anyone. He's pretty shredded for a big guy. I bet it ages okay. And you know what? If he's your third line right wing 5 years from now, and the salary cap is now at $90 million, that's essentially in $6.5 million. That's a $4.85 million deal right now. Talking in $2029. Mm-hmm. It may not be an overpay. We always talk about AAV. General managers look at percentage of the cap, and if you look at what that cap could be 4, 5, 6 years down the road, maybe it won't age that poorly.
Yeah, that's how a lot of Toronto fans look at it, and I think what Hope Management looks at it as well when it comes to numbers. I had to do this now, but it's going to look really smart in a few years. There's a lot of financial situations that the Leafs have to deal with. But in keeping with our topic on the Washington Capitals, as we speak with Tarik El-Bashir of The Athletic and a ringside reporter for the NHL on TNT, Alex Ovechkin is 72 goals away from tying Wayne Gretzky's record, which was once untouchable. Especially in this country, I don't think there's too many people that thought anyone had a chance. He needs 73 to break it. I wonder if this is going to become a team goal for the Capitals to make sure that he gets to that mark over the next couple of years. Or do you think that they're just going to, they're just focused on team success themselves, and if Ovi is as big a part of it as he has been previously, then that's good enough for the squad?
That's a great question. I would say what I've always been told, this is obviously the biggest milestone that Alex Ovechkin has been chasing, but, there have been other milestones along the way. They don't really talk a whole lot about it behind the scenes. Now, the players are all aware that, he's, 3 goals from, or 2 goals or 3 goals from having the most power play goals of all time. Everyone knows what's at stake, but they're so narrowly focused on winning that night's game. It's never really become a distraction. I've covered Alex Ovechkin since his rookie year. Early on in his career, when he was scoring 50 goals and having 50 assists, there were guys in the room where I felt like maybe they were like, oh, this guy's taking up all the oxygen. He's getting all the spotlight. I wouldn't say jealousy, but definitely people were kind of looking over there like he gets all the interviews. That's not the case anymore. It hasn't been the case for a long time in the Caps room. For the most part, the core is a very tight-knit group, and they cheer for Ovechkin. They want him to break that record. They all want to be in the picture when Ovi. It's kind of like a little bit of a running joke. Who's going to be in the picture when he sets the next milestone? So I don't know. I would say if you look at the trajectory of this team, I mean, they certainly are an older core, and it does feel like maybe, a rebuild is closer than further away at this point. If you look at the last, how things have trended the last 4 or 5 years since they won the Stanley Cup. But that said, I mean, I don't think if you ask TJ Oshie or Tom Wilson or Evgeny Kuznetsov, about Ovi setting that record or versus winning, they're going to go, oh yeah, it's all about Ovi now. Forget the win. I mean, they all still want to win. They all still want to win, and when Ovi is scoring, they're winning, and vice versa. So it's going to be a huge story. It's not going to happen this coming season. It's going to happen most likely, if he stays healthy and continues to score in the 40s. It's going to happen sometime in that 24-25 season. And the whole city of Washington and myself, everyone's looking forward to it because it's going to be the center of the sports world. I mean, there's going to be live cut-ins when the Caps go on the power play on ESPN. I mean, it's going to be a really, really big deal. And, if they're still winning, great. If they're not, it's going to be all Ovi all the time.
So that's an interesting question too. Like, we know that that's going to be the storyline around this team. Will there be a competitive relevancy to this team? Because it's 5 years since they won the Stanley Cup. They haven't won a playoff round since. They just missed the playoffs this year with an 80-point campaign. They're on their third coach now with Spencer Carberry in town, former Leafs assistant. Is there any reason for hope that they can actually make a decent run to coincide with Ovi chasing Gretzky?
Well, I mean, if you look at the past 4 seasons, since they won the Stanley Cup, you'd go, they're definitely trending in the wrong direction. Last season was the first year they missed the playoffs in 9 years. It was also a bit of an aberration. If you go back and you look at games missed, man games lost. I mean, like 30% of the roster, like key guys, were out for long, extended stretches. There were times in like February, March when I would look at the lineup and go, this is the first time all these guys have played together all year. So, it's hard to say that missing the playoffs last year was the beginning of this team's downfall. I mean, they still have some really good players on this team. That said, it's also, you look at the age and you look at what's transpired since they won the Cup. It's hard to also say, oh yeah, they're reloading with young players who are, going to step in and, this team is on the rise again. I mean, right now, early August, barring another trade, I think there might be one, that could happen. I feel like if they stay healthy, they could possibly be a playoff team. But there are certainly some question marks. One thing that answering your question, I mean, it's going to be very hard for Ovi. I shouldn't say very hard. It's going to be more of a challenge for Ovi to catch and pass Wayne Gretzky if the team around him stinks. And
right. Yeah,
I think
for sure.
Everyone from the players to the corner office also recognize that, that they have to have good players around him. I mean, there were times late last season where he was banged up and the team was losing and he went large stretches without scoring. Mm-hmm. And, I kind of looked around and was like, like could this, could 2024-25 become maybe the next season? Maybe would he have to start tacking on years to catch Gretzky? I think everyone saw that, and that's why, there maybe like a guy like Evgeny Kuznetsov, who has been rumored to want out of DC, was kept around, right? Because you got to have top line centers. Ovi's not he's not at the point in his life where he creates for himself. He needs to get the puck with speed. He needs to get the puck in scoring areas. So he can, put up the numbers that he's going to need to put up to catch 99.
I hope it really does capture the sports world in the States when he does do it, when he does break it. I mean, I know Washington's a strong market. There are several northern markets, of course, in the United States that we know rival some of the markets here in Canada. But I think overall there's this perception that hockey doesn't really move the needle south of the border. I think that with these two TV deals, I feel like it's moving the needle more. And if you had a big moment like this where you can capture particularly a younger audience with someone who's a legend and who's been a face for a very long time, I really hope and think it'll move the needle down there.
I really think it's going to be a huge, huge story, not just in D.C., but nationally because of the names, right? I mean, it's not only Alex Ovechkin, a champion in his own right. It's also Wayne Gretzky. I mean, even the most casual sports fan knows who Wayne Gretzky is. And, it's going to be really cool as he gets within 20 goals, like the countdown is going to begin. And like I said, I mean, there's going to be live cut-ins. There's going to be national media when he gets within 3-4 goals. Wayne Gretzky himself is probably going to be traveling with the Capitals when he gets to those last 3 or 4 goals. He's been very, very open. Gretzky, I'm talking about. He's been very open, talking about how he wants to see Ovechkin beat his mark. Like, he always talks about how, Gordie Howe was very gracious when he was passing him. And so he wants to return the favor and cheer Ovi on as he chases 894.
Well, hopefully it's a TNT game and you're on the broadcast, man. That'd be something special to be a part of. Something special. I feel like I was just watching you in the playoffs like 2 weeks ago on the road, and yet here we are talking about a brand new season just around the corner. But this was great, Tarik. Really appreciate the Capitals talk and the insight, and look forward to speaking with you again.
Hey, guys, give me a call anytime.
Yeah, Tarik El-Bashir of The Athletic. You can follow him, Tarik_El-Bashir on Twitter. OverDrive brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. So much to come here on TSN2, TSN 1050, and the iHeartRadio app. Back on OverDrive here on TSN2, TSN Radio 1050. My name is Brendan Dunlop. Happy to be filling in for Hayes Noodles and the O-Dog and to be alongside Dave Feschuk. DJ Luca, this is good, man. I never know what to expect with the music interludes on 1050. I like that you change it up. The Rolodex here seems very deep. Am I right, Grappler, or is that just like when
there's
I'm
really
on?
no, I shouldn't say there's no rhyme or reason, but there really isn't much of a rhythm. Like, as we've kind of seen through the week, it could be...
Are you taking away the praise I just gave Luca for picking
No, not at all. I'm just saying, like, it could be Taylor Swift, it could be the Arkells, it could be AC/DC, Metallica. We're all over the place. I think Dua Lipa makes an appearance in a couple of our segment intros.
Wow.
So we're all over the place.
Wouldn't have bet that. I also wouldn't have bet that we would spend a whole hour talking about Taylor Swift yesterday. I didn't.
In a perfect world, we don't do that again.
Yeah.
But people are buzzing about it. What do you want?
If people are buzzing about it, we're talking about it. A lot of buzz in the NBA circles today, Dave. Anthony Davis got a new deal.
Yeah.
The richest annual extension in NBA history. The Lakers have signed Anthony Davis to a 3-year max extension. It's a $186 million deal.
Yeah.
And he's a talented guy that, regardless of the number, deserves what the max might be. But have we seen that guy on the court consistently? Have we seen that guy contribute maximum impact to the Lakers? No.
But this is a good example of how in the NBA, with the way it's structured, with the way teams are essentially hemmed in, the Lakers' only option is to extend this guy. Because if you move off him, you can't replace him. But there's no possible way.
But why tie yourselves? You're just eating the money? Like, why tie yourselves to that commitment?
Well, look, there's a lot of optimism in Lakerland, and it might be misplaced because
of course it is. It's Lakerland.
He earned the name Street Clothes for a reason because he has not been a bastion of good health.
Did Charles Barkley coin that?
I think he did.
Oh, he at least ran with it.
Certainly ran with it. Certainly made it his own.
That's a hard name to shake.
But I mean, you look at it. He played 56 games last year, 40 the year before, 36 the year before, 62 the year before that. I mean, he hasn't played an 82-game season in his entire career. 75 is what he topped out as early in his career in New Orleans. So, yeah, there's a huge risk attached to this. Paying this guy $62 million annually through to 2028. There's a lot of risk. But, again, there's not a lot of other options for the Lakers outside of getting very creative, swinging some sort of a trade. Look, the guy... And the bottom line is, look, they went to the Western Conference Final this year, and they've done
overachieved though. And how much of an impact was he on them?
He was pretty good. He was good against the Warriors. Obviously, wasn't particularly good when they got swept by the Nuggets, but in the Western Conference Finals. But
nobody was stopping Denver though.
Didn't feel like
even him at 85%, which I bet you he hasn't been in 2 years. He hasn't been since the bubble, man.
No, but I mean, look, you're right. There's no defending his record of.
Health,
sitting courtside in very nice clothes, in very expensive seats, while not playing basketball. He does that very well.
Right.
He's an expert at it. But look, he was also a linchpin of a championship team, albeit a bubble championship team. They still got a ring for it. Mm-hmm. Didn't get a parade, but they got a ring.
They didn't get a parade.
They didn't get a parade. No.
Even at that point in California in November.
They still gross about that they didn't really get a parade.
I was at a cottage on Lake Huron watching that on like a 16-inch monitor. What a weird time.
Yeah, strange times.
Weird time.
Strange times. So anyway, I mean, the guy, like at his best, he's a great player who you can knock down shots from deep. He's a legit 7-footer with great mobility, great skill level. Great strength. He's, whether or not, sometimes you wonder, but the flame, does it burn bright enough? Sometimes he's a little bit, competitively challenged at times. But look, he's got, Lakers didn't have much of a choice. And Lakers are going to be good this year. They've made some good additions in the offseason.
This is it, though. Like, they got to go for it this year.
They have to.
And I feel like this move is just to keep LeBron to the end.
Doesn't hurt that he's also represented by LeBron's agent, Rich Paul, and
There's
all one happy family.
I'm also glad this is a different time where we're not in talking about bubble basketball, not living like we were during the pandemic. Music festivals are back, buddy. Canada's largest camping and music festival, Boots and Hearts, returning August 10th to the 13th. Acts this year include Tim Hicks, Nickelback, Keith Urban, Tim McGraw, many more. Here's your chance to win a pair of weekend passes. This is your cue to call 416-870-1050, 416-870-1050. The 10th caller through. That's what we're looking for. Later today, one lucky winner going to be upgraded to a sold-out VIP package that includes front-of-stage viewing, access to the barn and elevated viewing areas, comfort station washrooms, exclusive food vendors, Daisy Duke's private bar and exclusive VIP parties, and more. And general admission tickets are still available at bootsandhearts.com. That's going to be a weekend. I've never done that festival. And we'll see how the cards fall this time. Maybe I'll do it this year. This is OverDrive on TSN 1050, TSN 2, and the iHeartRadio app.